I'll never forget that day. Two cops ended up hauling me in, not realizing they'd one day face me in court, only this time, I'd be the one behind the bench deciding their future. It all started on a bright, warm afternoon in Austin, Texas. The park was alive, kids laughing on the playground, runners pounding the trail, families spread out on blankets under big oak trees. I was sitting by the pond, tucked into a bench with a thick hardcover resting on my lap. My name's Monica Harris, and I'm an attorney. I don't get much downtime, so that book was my little escape. I'd barely turned a page when I heard tires screech. A cruiser rolled up to the curb, pulling some heads away from their picnics. Two officers stepped out, both wearing the kind of look that says, "We mean business." Their eyes landed right on me, the only person sitting alone. "Ma'am, can we talk to you for a second?" one called, voice sharp, not exactly friendly. I looked up, calm, closing my book. "Sure," I said. The other one moved in a little closer. "We got a call about suspicious activity." "What are you doing here?" I raised a brow. "Suspicious?" "I'm reading a book." I even held it up like proof. But their faces didn't change. "ID, please," the first one said. My heart kicked up a notch, but I kept steady. "What's the reason for this?" "Routine," the second one replied, but his tone had weight to it. By now, a few people were slowing down, whispering to each other. I could feel the eyes on me. With a sigh, I reached into my bag, pulled out my wallet, and handed over my license. The officer read my name out loud, almost like it was a joke, Monica Harris. "What's your business here, Ms. Harris?" I took a deep breath. "I live here. Came to enjoy the park." "That a problem?" His lips tightened. "We'll see." He gave my ID back, but instead of moving on, they just stood there, grilling me with more questions. "Do you always carry a book like that?" one sneered. "Waiting for someone," the other added, resting his hand on his belt like he wanted me to notice. I've been through tough moments in court, but this was different. The air was heavy with power, and I felt every ounce of it. "I'm not answering anything else unless you tell me what I've done," I said, my voice firm. That didn't sit well. The first officer stepped closer. "Don't get smart," he snapped. "I know the law," I replied, steady as a rock. "And I'm not breaking it by sitting in a public park." But reason wasn't what they were after. One grabbed my arm. "You're resisting," he barked, even though I hadn't moved. "What are you doing?" I shot back, startled. The whispers around us grew louder. A guy even pulled out his phone to film. "Stop resisting," the officer shouted again, this time for the crowd. Next thing I knew, cold steel locked around my wrists. My chest burned with humiliation, but I kept my head up. They marched me toward the cruiser, ignoring the questions flying from bystanders. I caught the eye of a young woman with her phone raised, recording. We didn't say a word, but I hoped she understood, keep filming. Then the door slammed. And I knew, deep down, this was only the start. In the back seat, hands cuffed, my mind was racing. I'd spent years fighting for clients, standing up for what's right. Now, I was the one on the wrong side of the badge. The ride was silent, except for the crackle of their radio. I stared out the window, watching my reflection slide over the city streets, wrists aching against the metal. When we got to the station, things went downhill fast. The whole booking process felt designed to knock me down a peg, fingerprints, mugshot, the works. They stuck me in this little holding cell with buzzing fluorescent lights that made my head ache. "Enjoy your stay," one of them smirked as he slammed the door. I sat on that cold metal bench, hands clenched tight, replaying the park scene in my head. How did reading a book on a sunny day turn into this? The answer was ugly but obvious: bias. Hours dragged by before anyone bothered with me. Finally, this younger cop showed up, clipboard in hand. "MS. "Harris, you're being charged with resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer," he said like he was reading a grocery list. "On what grounds?" I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "You can argue that in court," he tossed back, walking off without a blink. I let out a long breath, forcing my brain into lawyer mode. The charges were weak, I knew that, but I also knew the road ahead would be rough. These cases always are. When they finally let me out on bail, the night air felt like freedom, cool and clean compared to that stale cell. Waiting by the curb was my friend and colleague, Rachel, face tight with worry. "Monica. Are you okay?" she called, rushing over. I nodded, but my hands shook a little. "I'm fine," I said, though the word felt paper-thin. We drove off, quiet for a while. Then I turned to her. "I'm not letting this go, Rachel. Not this time." Her grip on the wheel tightened. "What's your plan?" "I'm sick of this happening," I said, my voice firm. "I know the law, I have the skills, and I've got the resources. I'm going to fight back." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by legal pads and open casebooks, scribbling notes like my life depended on it. I started drafting a civil rights lawsuit against those officers and their department. My hands shook, not from fear, but from pure, focused anger. Days blurred into weeks. Then the video surfaced, the one the young woman filmed in the park. It spread like wildfire. Messages poured in, people from all walks of life, some sharing their own painful experiences. With each email, each phone call, my resolve grew. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd been silenced, dismissed, or humiliated. My firm hesitated at first, worried this case might make too much noise. I didn't back down. I told them this fight was bigger than reputation, it was about setting a precedent. And the video didn't just spread my story, it lit a fire. Conversations about bias and power started popping up all over the city, even beyond. News outlets came calling, wanting interviews. I said no. This wasn't about airtime, it was about building an airtight case. I worked late nights, digging into every detail, every statute, every precedent that could turn the tide. Still, when the world got quiet, the weight of it all pressed in. I'd replay the arrest, the look on their faces, the cuffs, the murmurs from the crowd, and wonder how far it could have gone if I hadn't stayed calm. But that thought didn't scare me, it fueled me. One evening, Rachel showed up with takeout. I barely looked up from my laptop as she set it down. "You've been at this non-stop," she said softly. "I don't have a choice," I answered, eyes still on the screen. She sat across from me, studying me. "You realize people are watching now, right? They're counting on you." I closed the laptop and met her eyes. "I know," I said, steady. "That's exactly why I can't afford to lose." I threw myself into the work like my life depended on it. I dug through old case files, pulled every precedent I could find, and stacked up evidence like bricks in a wall, determined to knock down every one of those officers' claims. I pulled in colleagues I trusted, smart, tough people who cared about justice as much as I did. But I knew this fight wasn't just happening in court. I started showing up at community meetings, town halls, anywhere people were talking about fairness and accountability. I listened to stories that sounded too much like my own, and I even spoke at a local college about why these moments matter. One afternoon, after leaving a meeting, I was heading to my car when a woman I'd never met walked up to me. "Ms. Harris?" she asked, voice trembling a little. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. For standing up. For all of us." Her words caught me off guard, tightening my throat. All I could manage was a small smile. "I'm just doing what I can," I told her. The support lifted me, but it also added weight. People were watching now, counting on me. Failure wasn't an option. Then came the call from my attorney. I expected it, a motion to dismiss, standard stalling tactic. But then his tone changed. "Monica," he said carefully, "there's something else. You've been assigned as the judge for one of their cases next month." I sat back in my chair, stunned. Of all the twists, this one was surreal. I'd been gearing up to fight these guys from the plaintiff's table, and now fate was putting me on the bench, robe and gavel in hand. Could I do it? Could I sit there, neutral and steady, knowing what they'd done? For a second, doubt crept in. But then I thought of everything: the cuffs, the humiliation, the faces of people who had told me their own stories. This wasn't revenge. This was a chance to show what justice really looked like. When the hearing day came, the courtroom hummed with low chatter as people filed in. It wasn't a headline case, just an internal misconduct hearing about excessive force in another situation. But when those two officers walked in, Miller and Thompson now, in this chapter, dressed in full uniform like armor, leaning close and whispering to each other, they had no idea what was coming. Then the side door opened, and I walked out in black robes. The room went still. I took my seat, calm but commanding, and finally looked toward the defense table. Officer Miller's face went pale, and Thompson shifted in his chair, his jaw clenching. It was me. The woman from the park. I let the moment breathe before speaking. "This court is now in session. Please be seated." Their lawyer leaned over, whispering, but I kept my focus forward. For the first time since that day, I felt the balance shift. But this wasn't about payback. I had a job to do. And that's exactly what I did: professional, fair, by the book. Still, you could see it in them. They were rattled. Every time I addressed them, their shoulders tightened, hands fidgeting. During a recess, I overheard fragments in the hallway, Miller's voice sharp, Thompson muttering, "How is she the judge?" Their lawyer tried to calm them down. "It's coincidence. Focus. Your actions are on trial, not hers." But their confidence was slipping, piece by piece. Back in the courtroom, I kept my tone even, my notes sharp. But every now and then, when our eyes met, I could see it, the memory of that park bench, the handcuffs, the crowd. And now, the tables had turned. When I looked at Officer Miller that afternoon, I didn't see defiance, I saw something closer to regret, like the weight of it all was finally sinking in. By the time I struck the gavel to end the day, the tension in that courtroom could have been cut with a knife. "We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m., I announced, my voice steady. As people filed out, I stayed behind, gathering my notes. I could feel their eyes on me, Miller and Thompson, lingering near the door like they wanted to say something. But in the end, they just left, their steps heavy, the message clear: this wasn't over. The truth was, the hardest part wasn't the irony of sitting on that bench while they squirmed in front of me. It was knowing the decisions I made next mattered more than ever. Could justice actually hold? The next morning, the place was packed. Word had spread: judge and plaintiff turned out to be the same woman. People came out of curiosity, some came to show quiet support. But I had a job to do, and my face stayed calm as I walked to the bench, robe flowing. The attorneys didn't waste time. The prosecutor was ready, laying out the case piece by piece, evidence stacked high, witnesses lined up. "Your Honor," he said, voice firm, "this wasn't a simple mistake. These officers abused their power. They showed a pattern of behavior that can't be ignored." I took notes, my pen flying across the page, not letting anything slip. Across the room, the defendants fidgeted, their confidence cracking under the weight of the testimony. Then the defense stood, his voice even but strained. "Your Honor, while there was an incident, this wasn't malicious. It escalated under circumstances outside their control. Punitive measures aren't warranted." I listened, but the echoes of my own experience were hard to ignore, the excuses, the careful phrasing, the quiet attempt to smooth it over. Still, I stayed steady. The facts were what mattered here, not my feelings. When the victim, a young guy named Ethan, took the stand, the room leaned in. His voice shook as he told his story, a simple traffic stop that turned into chaos. "They didn't even give me a chance to speak," he said, eyes darting. "It was like they decided I was guilty the second they saw me." The prosecutor pressed gently. "Did you resist in any way?" "No," Ethan said, stronger this time. "I was scared, but I did everything they said. It didn't matter. You could have heard a pin drop." When the defense tried to chip away at his words, Ethan stood firm, not backing down. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Miller took the stand first. He looked at me as he swore the oath, his voice a little shaky. The prosecutor's questions were direct. "Officer Miller, you've been accused of using excessive force. Explain what happened." Miller hesitated, eyes sliding toward Thompson. "I thought things were escalating. I made a judgment call." "And were you justified?" "At the time, yes," he said, shifting in his seat. "But looking back, I could have handled it differently." "How?" the prosecutor pushed. "Differently how? By not throwing an unarmed man to the ground?" Miller's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His silence said more than words ever could. Thompson didn't do much better. His testimony was tight, defensive, and every explanation only dug the hole deeper. I sat there, quiet, face unreadable, but my mind cataloging every word. This wasn't about me anymore, but I couldn't forget where it started. Inside, I felt a strange mix of frustration and pity. These men had been given power, and somewhere along the line, they lost sight of what that meant. They swung it around carelessly, and people got hurt. By the end of that day, the evidence against them was stacked so high you could feel the weight of it in the air. The prosecutor's closing hit hard, calling for the court to send a message: abuse of power wouldn't be ignored. The defense tried, but it was clear they were out of steam. Their arguments felt thin, and even Miller and Thompson seemed to sense where this was going. I wrapped things up with a steady voice. "We'll deliver the ruling next week," I said, striking the gavel. As people trickled out, the two officers lingered by the exit. Pale, quiet, maybe finally seeing the reality they'd built for themselves. But justice isn't just about punishment. It's about accountability, change, and making sure the same harm doesn't keep repeating. When I walked into the courtroom a week later, the place was packed. Every seat was filled, reporters lined the back, pens ready. What started as a single hearing had grown into something bigger, a story about trust, power, and the need for something better. I kept my tone even. The job of law enforcement is to protect and serve, with integrity and fairness. When that trust is broken, the damage reaches far beyond one person. My eyes swept the room. Miller and Thompson sat with their heads low. The evidence shows these officers used force they didn't need, ignored their own protocols, and in doing so, harmed not only the victim but the very trust they were sworn to uphold. Because of that, this court orders mandatory suspension without pay, full retraining, and a permanent mark on their records. The gavel came down hard. Court is adjourned. They stood, faces drawn, and for the first time, I saw something human in them. Miller hesitated, turned to me, and said softly, "Your Honor. I'm sorry. It didn't erase the damage, but it mattered, just a little." I nodded, acknowledging it without letting it soften the moment. Real change comes through action, not words. Later that night, I went to a community meeting. The room buzzed with voices, stories, frustration, and hope. One older woman gripped my hand, her eyes wet. "Thank you," she said. "What you did, it means the world to us." I smiled, quiet but firm. "This is just the start. We've got more work to do." And the work did continue. The case sparked conversations, town halls, policy talks, meetings between police and community leaders. People wanted answers, wanted better, and they weren't afraid to ask for it anymore. It wasn't about me. It was about making sure the next person wouldn't sit on a park bench and find themselves in cuffs for nothing. Change moves slow, but it moves. And one afternoon, standing on the courthouse steps, I saw a group of young activists gathering, signs raised, voices steady. It gave me hope. The system's not perfect, but enough voices can bend it closer to fair. And that's the kind of fight worth showing up for.